to, right?
So there's one part that we don't have to address on our agenda. Welcome, everyone. Can we have roll call, please?
Mr. Bean?
Present.
Mr. Coffey?
Here.
Mrs. Stipp?
Present.
Mr. Kennedy? Mr. Edmond?
Present.
Mrs. Lynn?
Here.
Mrs. Guerrero Numer?
Present.
So we already had our pledge, right? So we thank you for all the visitors that's here, and we do have comments on the agenda items. So before that happens, I'd like to share something with you on today. On behalf of the Board of Education, I would like to welcome all of our visitors in person and those watching via live streaming. At this time, members of the public may have comments to the Board of Education on any item listed on the agenda. Please note that this is not the opportunity or the venue for the Board of Education members to engage in conversation or provide response. The Board of Education respects and values your information delivered to us during public comments. Your comments should be directed to the Board of Education, and all your attendants must be conducted themselves, and all that attended conduct themselves in a civility towards others. You must conclude your comments in 3 minutes. I'd like everyone to understand that we're having a board meeting in the public, not with the public. So if that can give you a better understanding how board meetings are. So, who will be the first one?
Sure. Erica Martinez?
Good afternoon. My name is Erica Martinez, and I am a school counselor at Joliet Central. Recently, a friend of mine reminded me of the traditional greeting from the Maasai people. And how are the children? This typical greeting shows the value they place on their children's well-being. It also reflects on how their society is doing, so they respond, all their children are well. As a school counselor, I can confirm how zero tolerance, punitive mindsets, and policies criminalize our students, particularly our students of color. I have witnessed how students are pushed into the juvenile criminal system, providing them with no second chances. This year, I have seen an increase in students that have experienced different types of trauma. The pandemic has caused a wave of collective trauma stemming from isolation, high levels of anxiety, stress, loss of life in the family, and community. Trauma appears in different forms, ranging from behavior, physical, and mental health. As educators, we can end the cycle of trauma for our students if we provide the right supports in the classroom and school. Educators need to advocate for students more than ever. Essentially, our students are getting punished for expressing their needs. Young people are impulsive, and their brain is not fully developed. It is also our responsibility to care for these students. Restorative practices provide the ideal structure for students to heal, express their feelings, and rebuild relationship with adults and peers. In addition, restorative practices empower young adults through engaging with a trusted staff member in problem solving, working together to repair the harm their behavior may have caused through active accountability. This self-awareness and sense of connection will help them re-engage in the school community. I leave you with this quote from Fania Davis. Being a warrior and healer in the context of school-based restorative justice practice means practicing with active awareness of our own bias, implicit or explicit, and of systemic factors in our schools that cause harm. It also means creating school cultures of care, connectivity, and healing. So I ask you, and how are the children? Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Rico, what's the next?
Sure. Jory Borkowski.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jory Rakowski. I am the mother of 2 children, as well as an educator of 15 years. I have 2 master's degrees in the field of education, and I'm also a resident of a section of the city of Joliet that falls in New Lenox Township. I'm coming here tonight to voice my desire for you to vote to approve the annexation of the new Fairfield subdivision into Lincoln Way High School and end its years-long litigation that has cost taxpayers tens of thousands of dollars. Here's a little background in case you are unfamiliar with what I'm talking about. New Fairfield is a unique subdivision because it's within Joliet city limits, but is part of New Lenox Township. So that means our park district is New Lenox, as are our elementary schools and junior high. Our children attend New Lenox schools from kindergarten through 8th grade. These schools have vertically aligned their curriculum in order to prepare our children for success at Lincoln Way. This vertical alignment is a key factor for residents wanting annexation. Vertical curriculum alignment has often been cited as one of the most powerful strategies for improving student achievement. Vertical alignment ensures that content coverage at each grade level is cohesive, consistent, and appropriately linked to standards that have been aligned with state assessments. Vertical alignment allows educators to focus on continuing to build skills and knowledge while reducing the need for excess review and repetition. Additionally, the current educational climate emphasizes meeting rigorous state standards and passing high-stakes assessments. Again, we want our children to continue to grow their education following this vertically aligned curriculum with the peers that they have had since kindergarten. According to Illinois School Code Section 7-2B, annexation of schools is granted and allowable. Through this school code, legislation has provided voters with a mechanism for adjusting school districts so that children who attend elementary school together may also attend the same high school together. In enacting this provision, the legislature has recognized the advantage of allowing school children who attend elementary school together to then attend the same high school. Section 7-2B of the Illinois School Code gives voters the privilege of determining whether to acquire this advantage for the children within their territory. This section of school code ensures that this procedure is truly automatic. The legislature subsequently added a directive to Section 7-2B, which reads as follows. The Regional Board of School Trustees shall have no authority or discretion to hear any evidence or consider any issues except those that may be necessary to determine whether the limitations and conditions of this section have been met. The residents of this subdivision have followed all the legal steps that the Illinois School Code requires in order to annex into Lincoln Way's district. We have filed a petition with the Will County Regional, is that my 3 minutes? Okay,
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Richard Jakuzak.
Thank you.
Good evening to the board.
Good evening.
My name is Richard Jakubczak. I'm a resident of Joliet for 16 years. I live in a new Fairfield subdivision that whole duration, and I'm here to finish jury's testimony here. The residents of this subdivision have followed all the legal steps that the Illinois School Code requires in order to annex into Lincoln Way's district. We have filed a petition with the Will County Regional Board of Education with at least 2/3 of the residents of the neighborhood signing the petition. The Will County Regional Board of Education voted to allow the neighborhood to be annexed. Joliet Township High School has been in litigation appealing this ruling since 2013, with each year adding thousands of dollars in legal fees that could have been spent in enriching students' educational experiences. To conclude, Residents of New Fairfield are asking the Joliet Township Board of Education to vote to allow the neighborhood to be annexed to Lincoln Way. We want our children to continue their education with the peers they have had since kindergarten. We want our children to continue with the vertical aligned curriculum they have already received. We want our children to go to the high school in our township that they have been permitted to go to according to the school code legislation. What we are asking is not unprecedented. Cherry Hill annexed from Joliet to Lincoln Way in 1996 for the same reasons. We are asking in our subdivisions even further east of ours fall in the Joliet city limits, but attend Lincoln Way school districts. We do not want to continue fighting this issue in court, as this litigation has cost Joliet taxpayers tens of thousands of dollars in addition to retainer fees already paid to the attorneys. According to my FOIA request, Joliet Township High School has already spent $20,000 in legal fees just from 2017 now on this case. How much more money is Joliet expecting to spend on legal fees and not on student education? What will it take for the Joliet High School to allow our children to attend the same high school as their elementary peers, as Illinois School Code 7-2B dictates and Will County Regional Board of Education has voted they should? Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Second case.
Oh, he doesn't have anything to say?
Yeah. You didn't have nothing to say? Okay. Thank you for your comments. Can I get a motion to move on the consent agenda, sorry. Brain cramp. Can I get a motion to move on the consent agenda, please?
So moved.
Questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Edmund?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn? Yes. Mrs. Guerrero Nomer? Yes. Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stipp?
Yes.
We have recognition and awards. I'm getting tongue-tied today. From Central as well as West today. We love these parts. Celebrating our youth.
Good evening. It's my pleasure tonight to recognize the Joliet Central students who were honored to be the Mr. and Ms. J finalists for 2022. I don't see a lot of them in the audience, but I'm still going to read all of the names. These are very busy students who have been to a lot of award ceremonies the last month and a lot of recognitions, but we felt it was important to present them to the board even if they couldn't be here this evening. So I'll proceed. But just a little background on the Mr. and Ms. J recognition. It's a tradition at Joliet Central that began in 1958 with the idea of identifying students who represent the ideals of Joliet Central High School. And the process begins by identifying any senior with a 3.5 cumulative GPA or higher. Then the list of those students are sent out to staff, and based on ratings and feedback from staff, it is narrowed down to 20 students who are the finalists. Those 20 finalists then go through an interview process with community members, staff members, teachers, and from the feedback and the ratings that panel gives is how we identify the Mr. and Ms. J winners and runners-up, et cetera. So tonight, again, I want to just recognize those students who had the honor of being recognized as finalists, which is an accomplishment in and of itself. So our Miss J finalists 2022 were Nicole Aguirre, Caroline Baltz, Maddie Butler, Scarlett Chavez, Rachel Dunn, Amelia Romek, Lily Longsomcombe, Madison Madonna, Nawal O'Day, and Cassandra Pena. And then our Mr. J finalists were Jamie Barbosa Ochoa, Xander Kramer, Ruben Franchini, Alex Medina, Aiden Morales, Victor Munoz, Eric Palmerin, Jacob Slattery, Keegan Srebo, and Joshua Walsh. And then I'd also like to recognize Ms. Dina Zamuda, who is the sponsor of Mr. and Ms. J and puts a lot of time and energy into coordinating the whole process. And again, even though they aren't able to be here with us tonight, I just wanted to put on record the accomplishment of those students, so thank you very much.
Also, they were just recognized last week too at awards, so they're probably studying for their finals.
So the Joliet West equivalent is Miss Alpha Omega and Mr. Alpha Omega, and the criteria is virtually the same. And they were recognized and celebrated last Thursday, so not even a week. But I do think it's really important that this group of students who really have persevered through so much get acknowledged as many times as we can. And so this weekend, we get to acknowledge them once again with graduation. So tonight we have, and again, just like with the Central Campus, these are our uber busy kids, so they're not all here tonight. But we have Madison O'Hara, Lizette Alvarez, Erica Balbuena, Caitlin Gibson, Megan Kroc, Ellen Lundeen, Haley Mazer, Jessica Meza, Tiffany Trisna, Sophie Young, and that's on the Miss side. And then on our Mr. side, we have Praise God, I can always say it in my head, Agnahora, Jackson Bartelt, Braden Brophy, William Mendez, Walter Nowicki, Matthew Papish, Brandon Price, and Sean Zarowski. And just while they're getting their awards there, this year as well as last year, the students submitted videos, and I can tell you, I've never been able to be in the interviews. The principal's not allowed to be in the interviews when we do it face-to-face. But being able to view the videos is something that I always do before, well, 2 times that we had videos. Did it before writing the senior awards scripts and any kind of final letters that I need to do for graduation. And I can tell you, their videos are just so incredibly warming, and I'm so very, very glad of all that they've accomplished and contributed to Joliet West.
No, I need to keep going. Okay, we're going to take a little recess so that we can celebrate and shake hands with the parents and the recipients of the awards.
Yeah, you gotta look really nice. You can cover up.
Okay, we come back to order. Thankful all the time to be able to celebrate awards and recognize the young people for all their efforts. Now we're going to move to our superintendent reports and turn it over to Dr. Guzman at this time.
Thank you. As far as correspondence and legislation, we do have some new policies we will be reviewing that we just got the notice from press. So in June, we'll probably have first read for some policies and definitely this summer. And no other correspondence or legislation. So we'll move into our reports. So I will introduce myself. I'm up first. So, this, in the board packet, is a lengthy presentation. However, the presentation includes many items that the board already approved. So we're not gonna go through each and every item. I will be happy to answer any questions. What I do wanna say, though, that this was a team effort, and on this team, we've been working on this plan. I just want to recognize Shad Hallahan, Takara Parker, Steve Locke, Joe Wooten, Matt Narducci, Tino Villaflor, J.R. Randich, Diane McDonald, Brett Markham, as well as all the input they gathered from multiple staff members on this plan and on the various items that are components of the plan going into next year. Also, I was able to attend our meetings today. So we had optional meetings at each campus for all staff during first, eighth, and after school. And what was shared was most of the components of this plan, as well as our plan for addressing tardiness next school year. And it did take about an hour each presentation. We did gather feedback in the form of questions. And we will also be sharing information throughout the summer and next school year. But those presentations I felt went really well. I was able to go to first period at Central this morning and eighth period at West today. So I thank the team for putting that together as well. So as we look through this discipline improvement plan, this is because the district has been cited for having too many, in highest 20% of suspensions, as well as disproportionality with our exclusionary discipline for 3 consecutive years. This is the first time, I believe due to the pandemic, that we were asked to submit a plan, though this legislation began in 2015. So the information that the board will be reviewing tonight, there's an associated action item with the plan itself, and upon approval, the plan as well as this presentation, which really goes through each of the various components, will be submitted to ISBE by the June 1st deadline, as well as placed on the district website. So that's the background for this presentation. And I just went through some of this information. The data that is associated in the presentation did come from the ISB website. They collect that data on a yearly basis through our student management system. And I've asked Riley to help me out because we're going to jump through some of the slides. So Riley, we're going to go to 11 next. So this is component 1 of the plan. Identify indicators to establish baseline data and progress monitoring metrics. So our team looked at the exclusionary data, and we made some recommendations based on that data. We believe this school year serves as our new baseline data year, because pre-COVID we of course had some challenges, but post-COVID has new and different variables that we've had to respond to. So we're not going to forget about our historical data, but we've really used this year to respond to our current student needs based on where they're at right now. So specifically, what we're looking at is severe discipline infractions that lead to exclusionary discipline. And that means out-of-school suspensions as well as expulsion. And we're going to group this information by campus, infraction type, and number of types of infractions. Out-of-school suspension data by school, and every category will be broken down by race and ethnicity, gender, and grade in school. And we're going to pull this data together during the summer to make sure we're not missing anything, because obviously when we had to put this plan together, we did not have access to a full year of data. And then we're going to use that as baseline data to create goals for ourselves that we can progress monitor throughout the school next year. So that will look like total number of suspension incidents, total number of students with a suspension, including students with multiple suspension incidents, total number of days of suspension for all suspensions that are assigned, and discrete students and assigned days of suspension. So we're going to look at this in multiple ways. Then we're also going to look at expulsion data by school, and data will also include breakdown by race, ethnicity, gender, and grade in school. And that's already data that we've been looking at and been presenting to the board on an annual basis in July. So, any questions about the component one, which is really the data component so we can set ourselves goals? So the data that we used was data through April 5th of this year, because we had to start somewhere. So this is data based on infraction, and these are all the infractions this school year that led to some type of exclusionary discipline. The majority of those being out-of-school discipline with some number of expulsions as well, and it's broken down by campus. We will further break that down by all those other categories after we conclude this year. So component 2 of the plan is continued and enhanced supports for students based on the data. And I know up there it's microscopic, but the rest of the presentation breaks each component down. So the first half of the slide is those things that we're going to continue to enhance. So they're already being implemented in the district, but we're going to continue to make improvements and enhance them. So we have a number of dean interventions, such as restorative conversations, mediations, reentry meetings, and reentry plans, and we begin piloting contracts again, use of safety passes, behavior warnings, intervention cards. We also have student groups that we ran this year, and a lot of that information was shared in the forum in the fall. But there's also some additional groups that we plan on running based on student need. Behavioral health teams, partner agencies, and we're really excited that Will County is going to be providing, is it 2 counselors, 4.5 days a week at each school? So that's huge. So big thanks for that extra support. So again, that's part of the enhancing. Problem-solving circles, our intensive student supports room, which we redid the old version of ISS with a more restorative approach. And then rethink substance abuse intervention. That's new. We just started that. And that is for those students that are more exploring or beginning to dabble in potential drugs. And that's where we're at with the starting place. But that's only been in place since February. And then as far as those things that are new for next school year, common teacher expectations regarding restorative practices for the classroom, an advisory calendar presentation schedule that will improve student awareness of behavioral expectations, student engagement opportunities, and supports that exist. And we're really going to hit those things hard at the beginning of the year and throughout the year. Lunch advisory after school detentions, which is more of a social type of probation type detention. Cool down room, and the cool down room was piloted at Joliet Central, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, but that will be expanded district-wide. The Catalyst program, which the board already approved. The district substance abuse clinician, which is coming to board tonight. Establishment of a district restorative intervention leadership team to progress monitor all these interventions and the data and see where our gaps are and see where future enhancements can be made. The check-in, check-out intervention program and social probation, which is a shorter term of a behavioral warning where students may lose their privilege of a parking pass for a given time, or attending activities or clubs, or additional events and such like that. So questions about anything in plan component 2? All right, Riley, can you go to 37? So one of the things that we talked about this morning in the presentations was what is everybody's responsibility? And Ms. Martinez talked about restorative practices and the importance of restorative practices, and that is in line with this. So we all have a part in supporting our students, academically and behaviorally. So every teacher and every staff member has a part in establishing a welcoming climate and culture. So every teacher is expected to build a strong sense of community within their classroom. And some strategies that teachers will utilize will include the following. And again, these are things that we already do, but we need to do them every day. We need to do them every minute. We need to model this. And so we talked about that today. And there's a lot of things that we have to do differently going into next year. And one of those things is setting clear expectations for students and making them understand why it's important to have these expectations and meet these expectations. This is how we talked about responding to misbehavior in the classroom. Teachers build a wonderful community in their classroom, and sometimes the student is still going to make a mistake. I think it was said numerous times tonight, and I've heard this inside this room and out. Brain science shows that students, or that our brains aren't fully formed for rational decision-making until the age of 26. That's where the brain science is. So we have students who are 14 to 18, well, 14 to sometimes 22 years old, and so they are going to make mistakes, and it's how we respond to the misbehavior, and each student is different. So we're going to have a system and a structure, but then we also have to have flexibility within there to meet specific student needs. So every teacher, like we said, will be working to build that strong sense of community in their classroom, ensuring that students have multiple trusted adults that they're seeing every day, discuss behavior incidents with students and why their behavior is harming the classroom community. We're going to put training together that will begin this summer, as well as follow-up training in the fall. And if we're soliciting information from teachers when they want training, what time will work for them. If they need help in this area, we're going to provide it. And if and when the behavior continues or severe enough, then it's time to contact a parent, bring them into the solution, bring them into the conversation, and ask them to reinforce what behavior is expected. And then sometimes the classroom interventions are going to be exhausted, and they will ask for additional support in the form of a referral to the dean. And so this was also talked about today during our presentations, is how we respond when students do hit that level of severe behavior or a trend in behavior that is not changing based on the interventions in place. 41, Riley? So, student advisory. This year, we talked about this. We were very fortunate to have a great deal of work done on our auditoriums. The unfortunate circumstance of that was we did not have a spot this school year to bring students together as we have in the past for group presentations, grade level presentations, and such. So we're really excited that we're going to have the ability to start off the school year with our auditoriums available to us. And so we've begun creating a advisory calendar where we'll push in, but we'll also pull out. We may do this through group presentations or smaller presentations, but we're going to start from the beginning of the school year with talking about school-wide expectations, including hallways, the idea that every minute matters, focusing on decreasing tardiness of students, and modeling that we need to begin things on time, we need to end things on time, and we need to plan and work appropriately and model that with our students. And then I won't read all this to you, and this is a growing plan. This is where we were at a week and a half ago, but as things are coming up, we keep plugging them into the calendar. And this is deans, counselors, administrators, various staff that will be pushing in or pulling out to share this information with students. Lunch advisory and after-school detentions. So we've had detentions in the past, but they were different, and we haven't had detentions in a while in a systematic fashion. So detentions may be assigned for the following incidents. This is not an exhaustive list. Detentions could be assigned for others. But our thoughts are, let's take tardies, for example. So it is a reasonable expectation that students arrive to class on time. If there is an issue that we need to make a different plan for a specific student because something is happening or what have you, we will do that. But for the majority of students, it is a reasonable expectation they get to class on time. So if they're not getting to class on time because they're being overly social in the hallway, a natural consequence would be to serve a social detention during their lunch/advisory period or potentially after school. So we're not taking kids out of a class, we're taking them out of lunch advisory, and we are putting restorative practices within detention. So whether that's focusing on repairing the harm, understanding, how they're disrupting the school day, detentions could be served, multiple days if needed. And so this is something we will be instituting next year, and the detention will be supervised by paraprofessionals. So these are some of the program logistics. Again, I won't read this to you, but the thought is when a student, because we do get asked this question, a student who misses a detention may be offered the opportunity to complete it the following day. But one of the problems in the past was the makeup, because students wouldn't attend. So we will have a plan that we're creating this summer. What happens when students refuse to go to detention? What's the next step? Cool down room. So here's some of the data from Central, and I was at the Central presentation this morning, and Jeff Riley keeps the data on this, and I think he said something like 1,063. Okay, he wants to update it all the time. So the students number that have visited the room is 1,063. Average is 16 students per day, almost 3 per period. And so this is helping students de-escalate, cope. Maybe some students put themselves there because they're having anxiety about something. We also can assign them there. Student is in crisis. So this, and I have some options within here, but the way it was run this year, we had staff volunteer, teachers, and they were paid during their plan, and we had the support be about 2 teachers per period. When we did the cost, benefit, we talked about, well, what if we had a social worker in there or a psychologist? What's the differential? And the differential to put a social worker or psychologist, for the most part, because people do start at different places on the pay schedule, is about $20,000 total. And so the recommendation, though we have multiple options in here, is to staff this with a social worker or psychologist for next year. They are best trained in this area, and we think that they'll be able to provide another layer of support for our students. So there are different options in here, but that is the option that our team thinks is best. And that's the option that is in the onboard packet tonight. And I know I've shared a lot. Any questions so far?
Will they be the only staff member in the program?
No, we will also have to have an additional parapro
Okay.
probably that helps with some of the coverage and everything.
I say no offense against psychologists, but traditionally that would be something that was filled by a social worker, person in the environment model. That's all.
Thank you. Anybody else? And like I said, there were multiple proposals in there. Riley, can you go to 64? Thank you. So social probation, funny enough, we were in this room, I think a month before COVID, at a committee of the whole meeting, and we talked about putting in something like social probation when we made the change from expulsion warning to behavior warning, and then COVID happened. So we're now able to put this forward, and so again, social probation as another intervention, as a component potentially of a behavior contract, to make sure that we're getting kids to focus on what they need to focus on. And where behavior warning is more a long-term type of intervention for a student, this would be a shorter term. But deans would have the flexibility based on what's going on with a student. Maybe it's a week, maybe it's 2 weeks, maybe it's a month, depending on where the student is at. So again, social probation could include loss of privileges such as parking passes, attendance at assemblies, field trips, and other similar privileges, dances, maybe athletics and clubs, depending what the situation is with the student. But it would be another intervention, and it would, we're looking at interventions that we could do in lieu of out-of-school suspension to try and change behavior and work with students. And then I do want to talk a little bit about the district restorative intervention leadership team, and apparently when we were at West, it's now being called the drill team, if you weren't, so we love our acronyms, right? So apparently this is now the drill team. And so we wanted to have a representative team that is collecting input and making recommendations for improvement. This model has served us very well. We've utilized the instructional leadership team model with curriculum and assessment and instructional practices enhancement, and we want to do the same for behavior. And so the members of this team would be the Director of Student Support Services and the Director of Special Services. They would co-facilitate along with the PPS coordinator, and then school psychologists from each building, social worker from each building, counselors from each building, deans from each building, catalyst interventionist, academy coordinator from each building, and then 4 teachers from each building. And what this team would look at is how are these interventions going? We would look at our associated data. We would use this team to really progress monitor, looking at data as well as just where staff are at, collecting information, perceptional data, and everything for the purpose of improvement. And then component 3 is continue and enhance professional development for staff regarding restorative practices, cultural responsiveness, and trauma-informed practices. So with cultural responsiveness, our cohort model has really served us well. We build the expertise of 30 to 35 individuals, and then we are able to use those individuals with their approval to do things like critical conversations, to do in-house training, to push out in the community or pull in. I emailed a bunch of them today because I think we're going to try and run affinity groups next year for our staff. And so that model has served us well in building the individual and group expertise. And we believe, and based on the training that some of our staff members went to in San Diego a couple weeks ago, we want to use a similar model for restorative practices. So we are planning on running a cohort, and is it in July? July this summer, volunteer to build our expertise, and then we will also supplement with specific training during first and 8th period and after school. Part of our survey today with staff was asking them when they prefer training, what will work best for them. So summer as well as school year. And so these are our plans as we go into next year. So there's multiple components to it. Some will start this summer and then some will be during the school year. But staff development is a major part of any initiative. And so we'll continue to pay close attention to that. Any questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
Is there any programs that would, I guess, promote positive behavior instead of being reactionary to behavior, like being proactive for students to work toward? And I just say that because I went to the talent show on Friday night, and the talent was on a spectrum, right? And so but the kids were so supportive of everyone that was up there. And it was so amazing to see that. And they encouraged one another, just nothing but positivity. And so as I'm listening to this, I hear reactive. Everything is reactive to a behavior. Is there anything or approaches to get them to kind of strive towards something?
No, that's a great question, and do you want to share something?
We do have it, because I was just at Central today, or the other day, and I just heard people win awards, so the Steelman Star Awards, and we're recognizing students and staff for exemplary behavior regarding attendance, behavior, and grades. So I think I heard it on the announcements from Mr. Locke of students that were recognized this year, so we are doing that. We still give we have purple tickets that we give in the hall, so I caught you in the act of doing something good, and then you're supposed to turn that into the main office, and students are recognized as well. So those are some similar things, but I think what I'm hearing is, do we have something?
Yeah, and so
Worldwide,
one of the
district-wide.
things that we talked about as we were putting together the tardy plan for next year, part of that is positive reinforcement on like a weekly basis. I'm forgetting what it was, a weekly basis or 2 weeks, and do drawings, raffles. You know, at West Campus, Mr. Sub is a real popular thing, probably at Central too. So gift cards and things like that, dance tickets, free dance tickets, you know, is a big thing. So we talked about that, and that is something we absolutely can work on this summer, because we did talk about that when we were talking about the plan, that we want to have positive reinforcement. Also, another thing we talked about with the advisory presentations, and we'll have to work on this, but I had the opportunity to attend the Eastside Community Meeting, where 5 of our students presented their time at Joliet West or Joliet Central, because we had both representatives, and then what advice would they give to a freshman? And they were outstanding. And, you know, so also utilizing our student ambassadors, enhancing that, the number that maybe students can also be sharing these messages, especially, you know, seniors to freshmen coming into the school system. So that's something we talked about. So that is definitely something we can work on this summer, because it's an important component. We agree. Thank you for asking.
You're welcome.
So it's gonna be somewhat like a mentoring team or process
We
that
talked
you're gonna
just
put
mostly
together?
about even just having a more mature peer talk to a younger student as part of that transitioning process. I don't know if we talked about mentoring per se, but yeah, maybe not one-on-one, but how do we push them in?
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Okay.
Anything else? So that concludes the presentation. Yeah,
Now that you're, since you are done.
I am.
So I just want to say, from being a student here at JTHS, a little bit over a decade ago or so, and coming from Joliet Central, and seeing the programs that this board, before we got here, started like working on, and you as a superintendent were working on, and as an assistant superintendent, to now, I guess I'm blown away at just how hard you've all worked before we got here, just to lay the foundation to where we're going to now. To have as many social workers that we've had, to have a Catalyst program starting. You already had problem-solving circles, going into and ensuring that everybody is trauma-informed and trained. Going back to when you say positive, the tradition of Mr. and Mrs. J and Alpha and Omega, all the after-school programs, the fact that we have transportation for those things that I wish we had when I was in junior high. Going to college was like, wow, I had more programs at my high school than I did at my college. And we just continue to improve. And counselors and teachers are just talking about the work that folks like Mr. Markham are doing with the assistant principals, the principals, and the deans. And sometimes I get down on myself and wish I had done more with my life. I'm a licensed clinical social worker with a master's degree, but I'm like, how far, could I have been if I had even some of these extra programs? But I'm so grateful for all the work that everybody is doing. And again, I think it's important to say, I came from a home where every day I was physically, sexually abused, and my brothers were, but we went to JT, and now we all have full-time jobs, and we're all doing well. I'm so excited for the kids that are gonna be coming through our programs, that are gonna be graduating, because I think they're gonna be leaps and bounds ahead of where they would have been even 20 years ago. And it's because of the folks that care so much in this room, and that presentation, I think, is everything, and the way that you're moving forward. And I just think you guys should know, we see what you're doing, and we're really grateful for it, and we can't wait to see where it goes from here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very well. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. And Diana's going to share some associated information regarding staff development.
Good evening. This will supplement what Dr. Guzman ended with professional development. And so what I'll be sharing is what we have in place for the summer and then going into the school year. So I just want to just acknowledge that we meet often to talk about our funding sources, and we actually had a meeting today. So I'm very, to compliment our grant managers, we have very good conversations of how to best utilize all our funding within the district. And through these conversations and creative ways, through braiding and blending, as the state recommends, that we are able to offer all these services to our community. So for the summer, we have multiple trainings available. I broke it down by content, Eric. As you can see, we do, as I've shared throughout the school year, we do have some work, priority work for math in our EL bilingual program, which I've shared with the board as prior to that. Our social science team will be working on the DBQ project, so it's document-based questions for U.S. history, so really getting into interpreting a document and writing and interpreting text. We will have some advanced placement training as well for our staff. One thing I wanted to point out that tied to Dr. Guzman's presentation is the safety and security. So we'll have crisis prevention training, verbal intervention strategies with trauma for our staff, as well as training more staff to become facilitators for problem-solving circles. So that's our promotion here. If people want to get trained, we'll be running that in, I do believe, June.
June 11th.
June 11th? June 11th.
Mr. Dean Thompson wanted that shared at every meeting today.
So as you can see, the school year ends next Friday, but it really doesn't because we have summer school and also a lot of learning during the summer. So we function 12 months a year. I wanted to point out professional development that we'll be offering during the school year. Most of this will be during the school day, so we will sub out the cohorts of teachers. So the first one is cognitive coaching for our administrative and targeted staff. We're actually targeting staff in the PPS office to help them with those conversations that they have with students. So adding on that layer of cognitive coaching. We're proud to bring back our culturally responsive cohort number 5 in the fall. We will continue with working with our grade level teams with MTSS. And then our school days next school year, our school improvement days, 11 of them, will be dedicated to content-specific professional learning communities. Even just reading the survey today, teachers are asking for time to collaborate with their peers in their content areas. So just to explain a little of what cognitive coaching is, this would be our 3rd cohort offered at the district. It started before I think I was a teacher. So this will be our 3rd cohort working with our consultant. She's phenomenal, and it's very applicable to our roles. So Michelle, who's our consultant, will really work with our team to make sure that the training is dedicated and relevant to the roles that they serve in the district. It is intensive. She does it in 2-day chunks, so 2 days, and then she gives you homework to apply.
That's very cognitive.
Yeah, in your position. So that will be throughout the school year. Thinking of just the administrative team here in educational services, nobody's been through it except for 2 of us. So that's how many new people we've added in the administrative role and as well as in the buildings on top of our PPS staff. So we have a full cohort. This will be funded through Title I. Our other one is just schools cohort, so this is our culturally responsive cohort, number 5. It is directly tied to our strategic plan, current strategic plan, and promising future strategic plan. This will start in October, and this is funded again through Title I. And then I just want to share, working with our partners with American Institute of Research, the consultant that I work with, Chrissy Lynn Brown, she's been working with us very closely with our MTSS teams, and she's actually writing a paper on our school district and submitting it to present at a future coming conference. So she's really excited about the work that we've accomplished. She said the work that we've accomplished at a high school level is rare because implementing MTSS at high school is very difficult. And she said that what we've accomplished this year is awesome, and so she wrote a paper on us. So that's something to come. I'm asking for year 2 supports, continuing work with AIR for next year, again, continuing those various levels of coaching and professional development. This is estimated at and will be funded through our American Rescue Plan. So it's very brief. See, this is a very short presentation for me. I will have different components for the June presentation. We're still working on a couple other professional developments and finalizing contracts, and I will bring that to the June board. Any questions for me? Thank you.
Thank you for all the work. And that concludes our superintendent report.
Thank you, Superintendent. Let's go with our action items. Can I get a motion to approve A?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Can I get a motion to approve B?
So moved.
Second.
Questions? Comments? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes. Motion to approve C, agreement between the Educational Equity and Consultants.
So moved.
Second.
Questions, comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Motion to approve D.
So moved.
Second.
Questions, comments? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
EATI, Sports Medicines and Event Support Agreement. Motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
Questions, comments?
Yes, this is a recommendation for a 3-year proposal with ATI. They're our current athletic trainers. They provided services for the district for about 11 years. And we're asking to also increase the number of full-time trainers from 2 to 4, and that's just with all of the activities and events that goes on in our district. And of course, we have large facilities. There's just a need to provide those services for the students. We are, meaning myself and the athletic directors, are looking into another model, maybe within the next 3 years, where we can possibly have our current staff provide these services for us. But that's a process and a certification that staff would need to have in order for that to occur. So right now, we are recommending a 3-year proposal for ATI to provide athletic training services for the district.
Okay, so you're looking in the future to have a permanent staff member?
Potentially,
Okay.
yes.
I have a question, Dr. Hampton. It mentions 40 hours a week. That's 40 hours a week total, or?
No, so the 40 hours a week is additional, and that's more in the summertime. So when you see the 2 to 4, that's throughout the school year. But during the summer, we have all types of camps and different things occurring in the summer. So those additional 40 hours are during the summer.
Okay.
And we can utilize those however way we want to, based on, when students are here on campus.
Can't get enough of those. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Stipp?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Nomer?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Can I get a motion to approve F?
So moved.
Oh, second.
Question or statements?
The only, this is for the cool-down room with the certified staff proposal.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stipp?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Nomer?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes. Motion to approve G.
So moved.
Second.
Question or statements?
Yes, so as you know, we are entering into strategic planning this summer. The timeline of the plan is that the group of 30 to 35 individuals will be coming up with draft strategies that then will be assigned to action planning teams that will create associated action plans in the fall. So this is that time where we're creating a new plan, but we're still under the previous plan. So on an annual basis, and it's so exciting to get back to an annual cycle of everything, including strategic planning. So since the inception of our plan, we gather annual progress at this time of year so that it can be reviewed in the summer and we can determine what our next recommendations are for the board. However, we're doing this now so that this information can be shared up to date with the strategic planning team this summer. And then I am making the recommendation that 2 of the items that are in progress right now, we stop work on, and I want to explain that a little, but the rest of them, we would continue to work on throughout next year. So everything else that I'm not talking about that was part of the previous or the current strategic plan, that means because it was operationalized. So the bullets at the top, 1.6, 1.8 and such, those are things we're going to continue to work on. Further implementation of Naviance, career plans for students. 1.7 is the Transform School Improvement Days to provide targeted enrichment and support to all students. I'm making the recommendation that we do not work on that one because now we have our school improvement team that meets annually and makes recommendations, and we change the structure mid-strategic plan. So there's really no more to work on through that component at this time based on that team being created, and it's already being done on an annual basis. The other recommendation that I have is 4.3. That's ESL and bilingual students will experience elements of the individualized career plan that include integrated curricular elements to relevant standards and career development. And we're currently, with board approval, working on the enhancement and expansion of the ESL program. and the professional development that's really focused on the targeted support that our students need. And so I'm recommending we continue that work, and we put the ICP component on hold at this time, because really the work is focused on the enhancement and expansion. We're implementing co-teaching next year in this area. We will have the rollout at West in completion, and so we really need to concentrate on those other areas. So that's my recommendation along with the progress at this time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
So when will we start the ICP back again?
Well, we're still going to be focused on the individual career plan for all students through Naviance. It's just the specialized attention to the ESL bilingual program. It's not going to be extra at this time is what I'm recommending. We can still use Naviance, and that's already in the plans that we're working on. So that I'm not recommending we put a hold on. We need to continue to implement that.
So we're gonna start Naviance now?
Yes.
Okay. I'm glad to hear that.
Naviance is a platform that we began implementation on through our strategic plan, I want to say a year before COVID hit, or the year COVID hit. We were writing our guidance curriculum, which is in place, but obviously without advisory, and everything had to change last year. So yes, we need to come back to re-implementing Naviance.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero Namir?
Yes.
Can I get a motion to approve H? Some hours.
So moved.
Second.
Questions, comments? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Guerrero Namir?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Motion to approve I.
So moved.
Second.
Dr. Hampton? You don't have anything to say about that? No? I was trying to just beat you to the punch. I was just trying to introduce you. I thought you had comments. Okay, that's good then.
Oh, I say he, because he explained it in closed session.
No questions, no statements? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero Namir?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
And Mr. Edmond?
Yes. Motion to approve J.
So moved. Second.
Questions?
Yes, this is a recommendation to set pricing for breakfast and lunch programs for next school year. Due to COVID, the past 2 years or 2.5 years, there was a waiver of participation, which allowed the district to provide free breakfast and lunch to all students. That waiver does not exist going into next school year, so we must set pricing for next school year. Hopefully, they might allow us to have some flexibility, but right now, we're going back to normal pre-pandemic type of operations.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Hampton. Roll call, please.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero Namir?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Motion to approve K.
So moved.
Second.
Questions, comments?
This, the task force sub-recommendation, we created these positions due to COVID and the concern with shortage. We still have concerns with teacher shortage and other factors. So we are recommending that we have 8 permanent task force subs at each building for next year, so that we're able to make sure that if there is any kind of shortage, we're ready for it.
I think this is a good idea, especially, kids see the same faces, then they start to build those relationships with those task force subs. So I like this.
Thank you. Any questions or statements? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stipp?
Yes.
Approval, can I get a motion to approve L?
So moved.
Second.
Questions or statements? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Stipp?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Motion approved M, disposal of old equipment, 1 and 2.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or statements? Roll call, please.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stipp?
Yes.
Mr. Edmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Motion approved N, second reading of disciplinary guidelines.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or statements?
These are the disciplinary guidelines as recommended to the board at the previous meeting from the disciplinary committee. Also within there, the board had asked me to bring forth some potential options specific to headgear. And so that is in there as well. So if the board would like to discuss or determine how the board would like to move forward, this would be the time to do that.
I just have concerns with the headwear. I see that you have stuff in here for not covering the ears, but that's such a slippery slope in the classroom, and earbuds being such a major issue. I just don't see the reason to have the head covered unless for medical or religious reasons.
Again, my only issue is the students most impacted by the head covering rule. Is it impacts black and brown students the most, usually because of bonnets and do-rags? I do understand other people have opposing opinions on that, and I can see why also it'd be a concern to cover their ears. That's the biggest issue there.
This one is concerning the presentation we released on last month, right?
Yes,
And this is an all together.
it is, but the board can make.
So if we voted on this, it's not piecemeal, it's supposed to be according to what we got right here, right?
Yes, but you can amend the recommendation for the motion. It can be somebody can make a motion to amend something within here.
And that has to be now, right?
It would be during this time, yes.
So can we table this?
I would love to table this.
How would we proceed?
That's a good question.
Do we want more information on something that we want to table on?
Yeah, I think it's not so much a more information. I guess I can have this discussion now, because this is the time to have this discussion. Because I still, trepidation, I still have issues with certain things, and I don't want to just lump all these things together to say I'm voting on this and then not that. I want to make sure that clarity. I would, in this case, that if I do want to amend some things, then I'll just go ahead and say I want to amend some things. And then the board would have to vote whether they agree with my recommendation or what I'm saying or not. Because that's where I'm at in some things. I'm all about when do the board or when the administration, when are we going to set rules that the students has to follow? Because some of the things that I hear are nothing new to most of us that's been parents, that the kids are striving for them to be able to do in school or to wear in school. We all had those things and those opportunities to bring those things into the school. And I'm just curious on, they could have the argument of saying, how did this affect the schooling? And I could say the same thing back. How do that stop you from learning if you don't wear it? And that's where I'm at. You know, we have arguments on what is the difference if I wear it, and I'm saying, what is the argument if you don't wear it? And that's where I'm at. I'm having an issue with, it seemed as though, when I first came on the board, there was an issue with, and I'm going to go there, with the cell phones. And my biggest issue was, when did we implement cell phones? And no one could give me an answer. And then the next question I asked, everything should have an origin. And I have a problem when we implement something or we just go along with the process. But when it's questioned, then they say we've been doing it, but why? Why are we doing what we're doing? And what are we trying to accomplish what we're doing? And so that's the thing that I have. I see some things that are issues and they're not being solved. And when I see things as being an issue and not being solved, I'm going to question you on it. And I'm going to ask you, what is your alternative? Your alternative shouldn't just to give in to students. I just don't think that that is the solution. And I don't mind you all coming back to me, but I see it in both ways, and I haven't gotten an answer somewhat to my questions.
Can I provide something that I don't know if you'll agree or disagree? But we know that especially this year, there's been certain flexibilities given to students with dress code. We fully admit that. Whatever the board, and we've talked about this, whatever the board determines is the policy going into next year, we're going to enforce it. The same way we're going to require students to make sure they put on their IDs. If policy is that students can't wear hats or scarves or bonnets, we will enforce that. That's the answer. We have talked about that. That is the answer. So there was a second part of your question that I also want to answer. As an administrative team and looking at the discipline recommendations from the advisory committee, we looked through all of them as a team and discussed, pros and cons, because there's always going to be kids that push the limit no matter what the rule is, and we will enforce it. But there are some things that students wear now that as an administrative team, we don't believe are a safety and security risk, and we don't believe that they're a distraction to the learning environment. And that does not mean everybody agrees with us or has to agree with us, but that is where we were in support of the recommendations from the committee. In hearing the discussion from the board last week, fully understand there could be safety and security risks with hoodies covering ears, brimmed hats. So that's where I put the options in. A student doesn't have to wear a hat to learn and doesn't not have to wear a hat to learn. You will not get an argument from me. But some of these things are just what kids do now. It's, what they wear to Target. It's what they wear around town, and then when they come into school, we're trying to build a climate and culture, and I agree with rules. I completely agree with rules. But what they're allowed to wear for 90% of the rest of their time, some of those things become a distraction in the schools in the form of a wall between students and staff. So I really was focusing on the things that I felt had a rationale for a safety and security issue. And for me, okay, brim tats and hoodies covering the ears and face so that you couldn't see students, I understood that. The other things aren't a distraction for many staff, and they're not a distraction for me. They are a distraction for some. But as a distraction from the student learning or other students learning, I do not agree with that. So that's my answer to that, but whatever the board approves to be policy, we are going to enforce next year, and we agreed to that, and that is what will happen. And we will train staff, and we will work with staff on how to do that in the most culturally responsive way possible. And that would be my answer.
I'm gonna agree with you, Carla, on a lot of what you said. As a parent trying to shop for my 12-year-old, to find something that's not a crop top is extremely difficult. And to find something that I personally deem as appropriate is very hard to do. And I don't know where to shop to find them. So it is very difficult. So I agree with you on the clothing aspect of it. And then you already know my viewpoints on that, on the hat aspect of it, or hoods or bonnets or.
I feel like I'm gonna back whichever one we can enforce, and I feel like if we go with the rule as it is, go ahead. In order for it to work, it has to be enforced, and with the resource constraints we've had with COVID, and we haven't been able to successfully do that. So kids are wearing hats and hoodies because they can. Security tells them to take the hats off. They take them off for a second. They get around the corner. They put them right back on, right? And so I think it does create a more distracting environment if we don't enforce the code as is. And today, we're not doing that. And so, again, kind of like what I talked about earlier, confidence in knowing come August that we'll be able to enforce hoodies and hats. I just don't know if that's with the current resources we have. The deans are dealing with a lot now. We have this huge plan which is laid out in front of us, and it just creates a bad morale with students. Does it create a hazard? I mean, we wore masks for a year and a half. That to me, I mean, we couldn't tell who each other were. So I just want to be able to enforce whatever is the most efficient for our administration. If we can't handle telling 1,000 kids to take off their hats per day, maybe some go-between is the right answer, especially if the teachers are thinking that they're okay with it. That's where I'm at. Because right now, when I go through the halls of West and Central, the kids, it's a culture to put their hats and hoods on. So obviously, something's not getting enforced. And that's not a finger point. It's just what's most efficient, what is going to help our student body out the most. That's where I'm at with it. And I know society changes from the time I was in school. Every job you work doesn't need a suit and jacket. I mean, so there's things that, we have to adjust to as years go on. And we can still enforce other things and create discipline, but we have to hold to whatever we, as a group here, put out there.
I tend to agree with you, Garrett. In last month, I still believe that clothing dress codes disproportionately target the female students for reasons that are unacceptable in my mind. I was against headwear and talking. I spent the last month trying to talk to people. We go to colleges and everybody can wear a hat. I taught at Lewis University and they have hoodies up and they have their hats on. And so I've reversed course after talking to a lot of people. And I agree with you, Garrett, as well. It's got to be something that's enforced. And we see discipline reports for disrespect, which come out of kids not taking their hats off. We see insubordination reports because we've got kids taking their hats off and turning the corner, which is creating more and more and more and more and more discipline events. So we do need to adapt. And my only concern is it's a little vague in the clothing piece. We know that that's probably going to be tested by some at some point. But if, you know, the staff is enforcing it consistently in a consistent manner, I think that's appropriate.
I want us to just kind of slow it down and take a look at the language, because I see where the report says no offensive touching. That's concerning to me, because if they're girlfriend and boyfriend and there's some touching, they may not think it's offensive to one another, but it can be distracting and inappropriate, right? So I want us to really, and that's why I requested like tabling it, so that we can take a look at the language that's being used.
And I see where you're saying that, and I spent a little bit of time on the language, but the recommended is non-consensual, to go away from offensive.
I think
But
you were-
non-consensual means I don't consent. But if somebody is consenting, that's the other side of that argument.
That's the distracting.
Now, don't get me wrong, I can agree with what you all are saying. I don't want to major on the minor and minor on the major. But I want us to step back a little bit. I just want you all to think about it. I can go with this. But it's amazing to me that I go to the grade schools, teachers and parents that I know, and junior highs and grade schools, they're not having this problem. They're told not to wear a hat or whatever they're supposed not to wear. They're not wearing them. But I'm hearing kids say to me, and they have said it to me, I can't wait to go to high school to do the things that I can't do in grade school. And I'm just bothered by that. That they just think that this is just an open field just to do whatever they want to do. The first thing they said to me, I can't wait to be able to use my phone in school, because I can't use a phone in grade school, junior high. So if I'm saying to the board, if that's where we want to go, that's fine. I'm asking the question. I hope that we do have a school that's governed by some rules, and that we will be able to hold our students to those rules, to teach them that their life's going to have to be dealt with rules. I know we say we go to McDonald's and Target and wear hats, but those are uniforms. They got a hat that says McDonald's and they wear that hat. They got a uniform that they wear. If they told them not to wear a hat at McDonald's, they wouldn't have a hat on at McDonald's. And those are grade school kids. High school kids, rather. Sorry. So,
Is this a broader issue? But I keep hearing you say cell phone, and then the distractive, offensive. That's why I'm asking, is it broader than just this piece here? Is it
Yeah?
Do we need to, as a whole, look?
This is, well, that's what we're supposed to be looking at, this whole broader issue. It's just not one piece I'm talking about. It's,
Well, we were presented with,
These are the recommendations from the discipline
Yep.
committee based on them looking at policies and procedures and what they wanted to recommend going forward. That's the annual direction to the discipline committee. So these are the items that came up through that committee for recommendation.
So just the pages that's on here then?
But we can look at larger issues then beyond what is just presented here as,
The board sets policy, so the board can look at any policy the board wishes to.
and however the board votes, I'm a board member that supports completely what the board's decision is on. You'll never get me be talking about our decision once we vote in this board. I'm 100% on what we decide to do, okay? I'm just one board member with one vote, just giving my opinion on that. And I'm not stuck in my opinion. I can be persuaded.
So I have a question, because I do think you're correct, it's a little bit bigger than this. Could we go with the Vice President's recommendation to table it and have a committee of the whole, or discuss that again before the next meeting? Is that possible?
Can we?
Sure, we we just need to have expectations and policy set so we can finalize the handbook. And so I would say the longest we want to do that is the June meeting.
It's fine.
Because we're already, we
That's
have to
fine.
make those changes.
We
well,
don't have,
this, even if we voted on this tonight, it wouldn't change the next 8 days.
No, this,
So this is
oh,
not
I'm
for
so
next year
sorry.
anyway.
Yes, this is
So-
for
right.
going into
next year.
the next year.
This going into next year.
Okay, so,
No, it's.
no harm, no foul
Why?
if we table it.
No,
is what
no,
you're
if we
suggesting.
table, no, that's why I was saying, could we table it? Because it's not going to be implemented until next year.
So,
We have to rescind the motion.
Yes. Can we rescind the mo-
Michelle Stiff rescind the motion for the disciplinary, the recommendations for the disciplinary committee.
Can roll call?
Mr. Bean?
yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stipp?
Yes.
Mr. Edmund?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero Namir?
Yes.
and just to be clear, then I will work with President Edmund to set up a committee of the whole, separate from next board meeting, for the board to discuss this issue.
Okay,
No action is taken at that time, it's just a discussion. Okay.
thank you. Moving on to O, personnel reports 1 through 13. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Questions and statements? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Guerrero Namir?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stipp?
Yes.
Mr. Edmund?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
P, students' discipline recommendations.
After receiving and deliberating the information contained in the hearing officer's report, the Board of Education is charged with deciding, 1, whether removing the child from his or her learning environment is in the best interest of the school. 2, what the rationale is for the specific duration of the recommended expulsion. 3, whether all appropriate and available behavior and disciplinary interventions were exhausted. And 4, whether the continued presence in school would either pose a threat to the safety of other students, staff, or members of the school community, or substantially disrupt, impede, or interfere with the operation of the school. The Board of Education must then convene in a public session to formally vote on the motion to expel if the expulsion is the consensus arrived at during executive session. I make a motion under case number W212229 to recommend expulsion until June 2023, placement at Lincoln School.
So moved. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Lynn?
No.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer?
No.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
No.
Mrs. Stiff?
No.
Mr. Edmund?
Yes.
I make a motion under case number W212230 to recommend expulsion until June of 2023 and placement at Lincoln School.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Edmund?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
I make a motion under case number W212231 to recommend expulsion until June of 2023 and placement at Lincoln School.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mr. Edmund?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
I make a motion under case number W212232 to recommend expulsion until June of 2023 and placement at Lincoln School.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Edmund?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes. I make a motion under case number W212233 to recommend expulsion until June of 2023, placement at Lincoln School.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Edmund?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
I make a motion under case number W212234 to recommend expulsion until December of 2022 and placement at Lincoln School.
So moved. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
No.
Mr. Edmund?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
No.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer?
Yes.
I make a motion under case number W212235 to recommend expulsion until June of 23 and placement at Lincoln School.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Guerrero-Numer?
Yes.
Mr. Bean?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey?
Yes.
Mrs. Stiff?
Yes.
Mr. Edmund?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynn?
Yes.
Have any unfinished business?
No.
Okay, good. New business? Board reports. What was, I have to remember what I was at that was so tremendous with,
Illinois National School Public Relations Association Award and the National Hookup of Black Women receiving that.
correct. I went to that meeting. It was outstanding meeting. Tremendous awards, young people that was outstanding, and I was very privileged to be at that meeting of the recommendations that was given and the awards that was given. And one individual had something that he got a standing ovation, and he was nothing but a student. But he did so much for his school And then I thank the board, we also supported our community, always get to partner with, right? And I'm glad that we was there to be there to support them in that event, so.
Mr. Bean and
Yeah,
Mr.
I was going to say,
and then-
Mr. Bean was there, and, we got there just in time. But it was all good. So that's the only report that I have.
Well, I don't know if this should come from me well, I guess it should. So I would like to thank JTHS 204 for partnering with Workforce Services Division of Will County on a toiletry outreach, a collection of toiletries to donate to the 9 opioid recovery homes. So when individuals enter into recovery, they can't take anything and with nothing but the clothes on their back. So they don't have any toiletries or anything. So our organization decided to give back, and we're gonna implement a service project every quarter. So I just want to thank you guys. I saw them at the door as I was walking in, so thank you so much.
All right. I think we have comments from,
Yes, we have one. Amy Kempa.
the same rule applies, 3 minutes.
Okay. So I am also a parent in New Fairfield subdivision, and I'm actually glad that I got to sit through this meeting and understand more of what the struggles that the Joliet Township High School school board faces, and that the school and the children face every day. You guys made some very, very good points. So I'm just gonna start here. During the pandemic, as most of you know, rates of depression and anxiety more than doubled among children and young adults. Only 51% of them have received mental health services. Several national groups, including the American Academy of Pediatrics, American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, as well as the Children's Hospital Association, have all declared a national emergency in regards to child and adolescent mental health. This worsening crisis is directly tied to the toxic stress brought on by COVID-19. I know one of the points made was that children are still developing and their brains are growing at this stage. And when their brains experience toxic stress like this, it has a severe and profound effect on the way that they develop and the way that they learn. This stress has been brought on by COVID-19, both due to uncertainties at home and the isolation caused by having the day-to-day routine of familiar structures, peer groups, and school provide disrupted. This toxic stress has been a profound impact on the adolescent developing brain and has shown a significant increase in child and adolescent anxiety, depression, and suicide. 9 out of 10 teens who have taken their own life in the past 2 years suffered from anxiety. There is a website that gives parents steps 1 through 12 onto how to prevent suicide in teens and young adults. The step number 9 is to encourage time spent with friends. They need their social support. Relationships with friends and adolescents are the most important relationships beyond family. They offer a sense of comfort and protection, and they assist in the development of social skills. The ages of 11 through 15 are the most crucial and vulnerable stages of adolescence that require stability in schools, with peers, and support. So I just wanted everyone to take that into consideration when fighting this fight of keeping these kids with the kids that they have grown up with, and the transition that they're also gonna have to face, not only with the stressors of being an adolescent and what COVID has brought, but now transitioning to high school, which is already a stress that we all know, but going into it with no one that they know. They don't have the familiar faces of teachers or friends. So I want you to really consider if this is a fight worth fighting.
Thank you. And we thank you for the comments, and thank you for sitting through our board meeting.
I have an
You got
announcement,
an
if that's okay.
announcement?
I do.
You got an announcement,
I
okay.
do. I would just like to introduce Matt Kellett, who is our new Director of Information Technology Systems, and welcome Matt to the district. So, that's my only announcement.
We have another one in the audience.
Oh, okay.
So I do believe our new PPS coordinator for the West Campus, Julie Edelman, right,
Oh.
is in our audience as well. And she'll be transitioning with Takara as Takara transitions into her role. So
Thank
welcome,
you, and
Julie.
welcome.
Congratulations.
That's all the announcements? Sure. Okay.
Oh.
I
We're
knew
just
it was
gonna have to
somebody-
have people start introducing themselves.
I knew if somebody knew, I was gonna ask them, okay, who is that?